IMF says Canada to struggle. China flexes. Did India just make a deal with the US? And does the outcome of this election determine the fate of media? And so much on election 2025. I'm Jim Csek with NowMedia. On the phone with me in our nation's capital, Iain Burns, looking at our live shot here behind me. Traffic flowing nicely in another beautiful day in the central Okanagan. How are things looking out in our nation's capital?
Not good. Very, very grey and just a bit unpleasant in general, really. It's been a very tough spring so far.
Well, it's very gray in the outlook of, according to the World Economic Outlook for Canada as well. Again, at the bottom of the list. Gotta love that, right?
Well, I think actually the British are looking worse there. And the
Oh, there you
Japanese,
go.
I mean, the Japanese look worse as well, but the Japanese just don't care. Their economy has been stagnating now for about 40 years, and they don't
Yeah.
seem to care. Life goes on in Japan. So I mean, that's a unique one. But the British are in hell. I mean, that country is. I don't want to talk too much about it because we got our own problems, but everything I hear from there is just like doom and gloom. It's a really depressing situation over in Britain. And then yeah, Canada 1.4, 1.6. So that's the GDP growth in 25, 26. That's not going to keep up with inflation. So if this is accurate, this this year and next year we're going to get poorer as a country again, which we already did last year. So, you know, get your
How
seatbelts on.
how can Canada? I mean, how can the UK be in such dismal shape? Didn't Mark Carney rescue them from their economic crisis?
Mark Carney, Mark Carney's got the perfect response to that, which is Brexit, because he was against Brexit. So he would say, this is the fault of Brexit. Of course, the British economy, even when Britain was in the European Union, was stagnant and just went nowhere, did nothing. Assets became insanely expensive. Inflation in general ran high during his time in as the central banker over there. But I mean, the main cause, or let's say some critics say that the main cause of Britain's current poverty is a combination of NIMBYism, which is a refusal to build anything ever, because one person might complain and say that it hurts the habitat of a seagull or something like that. So nothing gets built. Houses, businesses, whatever it is, it just doesn't happen. And then the other thing is net zero, fanatical commitment to net zero, which has made
ESG.
Britain the
Yeah.
most expensive country on earth to get energy. So they don't any longer have the sort of margins to work with to have a successful industry. So they're in full panic mode about that.
I've heard lots of politicians blame the UK's current woes on ESG for sure. Environmental, social.
Absolutely. I mean, the person in charge is a guy called Ed Miliband. He is absolutely just so gung ho. He's fanatically committed, almost as though it's a religion. And he keeps saying the party that he's a member of is called the Labour Party. It's kind of like the left wing party. They promised before the election, which was just July last year. They said your energy bills will go down by this much. I think they said £300 or something like that. In the event, they've gone up by about that much. And he keeps on saying he's absolutely convinced that it's going to make energy loads cheaper and it's going to be such a great idea. But it never happens. Also, a promise of jobs. And I mean, you could say, why are we talking about this? We're in Canada, not Britain. Mark Carney seems to me to be very strongly influenced by the British political scene. I've noticed this over the last couple of months. He is really plugged into British politics, I think, and he's like very simpatico with the Labour Party. And I think, he's committed to decarbonising Canada's economy and energy system and all the rest of it. I think it is pretty important for us to look at Britain actually and say that that might be a little bit of what we're in for. That might be a sort of a taster of what we could win.
Well, you tried to go back. You and your wife and kids tried to go back to the UK, and you didn't last very long there. What was the logic in that?
Um, well, many reasons really. It's one of the most expensive countries in the world to be in. Just to live, try and live a life. You don't get paid very much at all, like very, very low salaries. I mean, the Americans joke about London in particular, and they say it's like Manhattan prices, but with, I don't know, like what's a second-rate city, like St. Louis salaries or something like that,
Mississippi.
you know, like
Mississippi is
yeah, like
the
Mississippi
state of
salaries, Mississippi salaries, but Manhattan prices. That's kind of like in a nutshell, that's why England sucks. But on top of that, there's just a general degradation in that country where it's it feels like it's you know another joke about Britain is that it's referred to as an undeveloping country because it's gone from being a developed country and it's undeveloping. It's going down the ladder. It's going the wrong way.
I
And
think
you walk around the streets and it's just like trash filled and it's just like so densely populated that you can barely move. And the thing that really freaked me out, I think, because I have children, is that we couldn't we literally two my wife and I both sort of professionals, I guess you could say, in terms of our jobs, we could not afford to turn on the heating as often as we needed to stay warm. And it was one of those cases where I was like looking at my kid, like my son then, my wife was pregnant at the time, and I just thought, no, no, thank you. I'm going to go back to a
in fact
country that has a more reasonable energy policy for now, at least.
you're like living in your own modern day Scrooge, where you're asking for more coal so you can turn on the heat.
If only they let you have coal, but coal is like you probably have. It'd probably be easier to get a nuclear weapon into Britain, smuggle one in, than to use coal to keep yourself warm.
Yeah. Sadly, that's the state of the UK, and we have somebody here that wants to model the UK model in very much the same way. I'm not sure why the UK. King Arthur would be rolling over for all that was glorious about the UK. There you go. China flexing in the Philippine waters. So they drove away a Philippine Navy ship from a Scarborough shoal yesterday, calling it an illegal intrusion. So the shoal is 120 nautical miles off the coast of the Philippines and over 500 miles from China, but China says, no, that's ours.
Uh, this is very much not new, and the Philippines actually has been on the wrong end of this a number of times. This is one of the reasons that the Philippines and also Vietnam and Taiwan as well. It's the reason that they're so favorable towards the United States because they think the United States is the only possible way that they can defend their sovereignty against China. But China, like they have this idea that there are two seas there that the Chinese basically claim. There's the South China Sea and the East China Sea. And despite having China in both of their names, they are not all within the Chinese maritime borders based on the post Second World War system of how you decide which part of the sea a country controls. They're not in China. It's like lots of other countries have claims, but the Chinese going back before then, going back to like the Qing Empire and the Ming Empire, that these from the sort of Tudor times, like the Renaissance times, and then right up to the very beginning of the 20th century when the Qing Empire ended in 1911. They looked at that on a map and also in their deep history. The Chinese are like absolutely obsessed with history and it instructs a lot of the present in China. They look at that as their own territory. It's without question that is theirs, and they look at the Philippines as being the country that's encroached here, and that's why they've gone there. They've gone to the South China Sea particularly, and they've dumped like loads of sand and whatever else, pebbles or something like that, to create these artificial islands. And then they say, "All right, you say that it's based on territory. Here's our territory. Like we have land here now." So I mean, this is just all part of China. This is all part of China trying to challenge the American empire, if you want to call it that, in the Pacific and the American system that has existed since the end of the Second World War.
I mean, we have some of that going on even in the Arctic with, like, sorry, excuse me, I'm still fighting that cold. The Russians claiming, the Arctic, the Americans claiming it, and Canada obviously exercising our rights in the Arctic. But China's actually put its face in there as well, which is hard to believe how they could lay claim to the Arctic.
I mean, it's a bit desperate, isn't it? They call themselves a near Arctic state. If you look right at if you look at sort of like Manchuria, like right up in the far northeast of China, they have a bit of territory that gets about as high as, I don't know, it's about the 51st parallel or something like that, or 52nd parallel. The Arctic is the 66th parallel, so they're miles away from it, even if they claim that. But I suppose their main de facto, like in reality, their main claim is that they increasingly now control Russia and have Russia's destiny in their hands. And obviously, Russia is very much an Arctic state. So, in that sense, I suppose they can claim that that's their way in.
Yeah, JD Vance says that the U.S. and India are in the final stages of finalizing a trade deal, and that's been the rhetoric that's been coming out of the White House for the last while, that the deals are now coming. And then we talked about that a couple of days ago, saying China threatened, saying that you're careful which deals you make, because if you make a deal with the United States, you're going to have some trouble with China. And China and India, obviously, right next door to each other, and like they have the world's two largest populations. And we got to play a little clip here from JD Vance first.
As many of you are aware, both of our governments are hard at work on a trade agreement built on shared priorities, like creating new jobs, building durable supply chains, and achieving prosperity for our workers. In our meeting yesterday, Prime Minister Modi and I made very good progress on all of those points. And we are especially excited to formally announce that America and India have officially finalized the terms of reference for the trade negotiation.
There you go. They're talking about that they're close to finalizing a deal, as the stock market in the Trump tariff terror. How's that?
It's very interesting though, because I mean, this is interesting on so many levels. India, for so long, India just completely refused to do trade deals with other countries and refused to even have like alliances with other countries. That was kind of Gandhi's vision, and that's why they have that. That's even if you look at the Indian flag, they have this spinning wheel in the middle of the flag, don't they? And that's supposed to represent like self-sufficiency. And that and obviously because India was conquered for so long by the British, and then before that by the Mughals, and they have a long history of being conquered by outsiders. So I think when they finally won their freedom in 1947, they just wanted to develop themselves. So they didn't really make any friends, and that's where like the term third world comes from, because they were neither capitalist nor communist, neither Soviet nor sort of US aligned. But that's changing now, and in large part, yeah, that's because of the rivalry with China. And they very recently killed each other's soldiers in brutal, like hand-to-hand combat in the Himalayas, didn't they?
Yeah.
And they have all kinds of arguments they have with each other. Like the Dalai Lama is, he's like, India's quite friendly to him, or seem to be, and obviously the Chinese don't like that because they conquered Tibet, and that's territory that the Dalai Lama sort of claims as lost, conquered territory. So there's a lot going on between India and China. But
I mean, they have the
it's
both.
interesting that the US would go in there, because it's not really going to be a market for US goods, I don't think. I don't think it would be a balanced trade relationship, as the Americans like to find.
They're very protectionist, and they have been for, like you said, quite a while in their economies. But they have a very large population base. I think they're second in the world, and China has now, like you could argue in some respects, as a leading economy in some of the sectors now. Even more so than the Americans. The big power they do still have is that U.S. dollar. So big economies, a big population base, and that economy is also coming out of what people would refer to as a third world status, where they have a lot more people purchasing and doing different things. So yeah, it's an interesting market. It's a huge market.
Yeah, I know another thing, the US, so the US is saying they finalized the deal. Also in the UK, there are stories going around, leaks and all the rest of it, and half-baked announcements that the UK has also finished a deal with India. So it looks like India this year, presumably, is going to announce trade deals with Britain and the US, but obviously not likely to include Canada in that group, because there is an immense amount of hostility between Narendra Modi and the Indian elite and the Liberal Party and I guess the Canadian elite. So we're not going to be in on this bonanza, unfortunately.
Let's get to our election 2025 coverage as it heats up here as we get into the final 7 days of this election that has, it looks like it's a razor thin thing. We're going to just dive right in there. There you go. Looks like a dead heat, basically, the latest Main Street poll. Starting to see this kind of like looking a lot like a real race here. And then the block's starting to surge a little bit as well. I mean, Blanchet actually handled himself pretty well in the debates. He actually came across as a fairly reasonable guy. And there's some stuff we'll talk about later, too, where he's actually talking about things that are good for Canada, not just Quebec. Who would have thought?
I don't know if I share your optimism, I'm afraid. I'm not sure I agree with your assessment that he's reasonable when he repeatedly said during both of those debates that, or implied very strongly that Quebec pays for the rest of Canada and pays for things like pipelines that don't benefit Quebec. I mean, that to me is that's delusion of a sufficient severity to warrant a kind of medical intervention. I think that's like he needs psychiatric assistance if he genuinely believes that's true, because he's living in a complete parallel universe if he thinks that that's true.
Yeah, no, I'm saying it from where he was and where he is. You know what I mean? Like, I agree with you on those points, but he seems to have said some things that, like I said, we'll get into a little bit later that are not just focused on Quebec for some, because usually it's just 100% all about Quebec. The National Post put out a thing. It says they seem to be climbing back in the polls. So it seems like everybody's climbing back because these polls seem to have everybody down and out other than the Liberals. The Liberals were looking like they were going to win every seat across Canada. And all of a sudden, even the NDP is starting to get back some of that traction that supposedly they lost. But if you looked at the polls now compared to weeks ago, it looked awfully red, and now things are starting to even out.
It's the classic, isn't it? It's the honeymoon period.
Yeah.
And it's not just the honeymoon period, but it's another phenomenon, which is as you get closer to the polling day, it doesn't really matter what's going on. Usually the two main parties will converge. It happens almost all the time. And if you look back, going back to the previous elections, the recent ones, even Justin Trudeau's first election, in Justin Trudeau, when he actually won, the only time he ever really won a popular vote and a big majority in 2015. Even then, like Stephen Harper was ahead for quite a lot of that election. He narrowed it in the last sort of week or two. So that's common. That happens all the time. But simultaneously, you've had this Mark Carney effect, haven't you? And a lot of people have been kind of dazzled by Mark Carney because they didn't really know who he was, other than, he's just this really successful guy who has worked for lots of like prestigious institutions and has a very high reputation. And he's not Justin Trudeau, and he, speaks in a pretty sort of like straight shooting way, sort of anyway. And I think people were just kind of like, wow, this is great. But now that they've seen more and more of him, and the Tories have got a few punches in, haven't they, on the likes of Brookfield? I feel like, yeah, naturally the shine starts to wear off, and then the evidence of that is in basically every poll going right now, which shows that there's a narrowing.
Well, the Liberals dropped their platform on the weekend here, and it had huge spending in it. And then so Poilievre said he would drop it on Tuesday, and he has. And he's dropped his platform. We're going to go through it here. We're going to go through it in a bit here, but we'll hit some of the highlights here to this morning. But we're going to spend a lot more time on his change platform. That's basically what it's all about there. If you want to change that slide there, Rommel. I mean, basically it comes out there is that they said that they're going to cut the Liberal deficit by 70%, spending less on bureaucracy, consultants. And we talked about that yesterday, $25 billion in consultants last year. Holy cow. We got to get in on that. Foreign aid, handouts, insiders, and special interests, because we didn't get any of that, zero. $25 billion. So I'm going to say that over and over and over again. $25 billion for consultants. And at the same time, grew government by just astronomical amounts as well. Lowering the income tax by 15%, saving the average worker about $900 and the average family about $1,800. Building those $2.3 million homes by axing the sales tax and paying cities and other cut development taxes. Locking up criminals and putting Canada first for change. I'm not sure how that's a point that's other than just a subjective point that doesn't really say much for 0.5. Scrap the capital gains tax and axe the tax on a reinvestment in Canada. We talked about this in the past. So that's the one that I think could be rocket fuel, because people would reinvest their money back into, that would be, people reinvesting back into Canada. That's what's been the problem in Canada. People are leaving, like businesses are leaving, people are leaving, they're taking their dollars and they're fleeing south. And this would actually help. Topping up the TFSA, an extra $5,000, which would be really great for young people, and also raising the tax-free threshold for working seniors to $34,000, which is great. And then there's a bunch of other stuff, and we'll go through those later on. But he did talk about media in there as well. Maybe I'll let you take over on that.
Yeah, well, he quotes Wilfrid Laurier, a bit cheeky of him to do that, obviously trying to poke the Liberals in the eye. His quote is, "Canada is free and freedom is its nationality." So I'm sure most people have heard that many times. But no, it's very interesting. They use the term free speech. We don't get to see that a lot from politicians, do we? And he uses the word liberty as well, which is, it's kind of remarkable. You just don't hear politicians speak like that anymore. It's usually about how they're going to infringe on your liberty and how free speech is dangerous when you add the word hate to the front of it. But yeah, so he says he's going to introduce a Freedom of Speech Act, which will repeal what he calls liberal censorship laws. He doesn't specify what he means by that, but I imagine it's C18 and C11. And he says wants to restore news to Meta, which obviously would be a real gift to independent media outlets who've suffered so brutally and savagely from the Facebook ban, which has cut revenue and traffic for many, many outlets and destroyed many outlets as well. But he says he wants to keep the local journalism initiative and actually give it an extra $25 million, which is an interesting thing. The local journalism initiative, much of the content on there is considerably to the left of, I would say, even the Green Party. So I don't know if he's going to try and change the kind of outlets that are given that money, but we'll see. And then this is a really interesting one as well. Ensure all domestic government advertising dollars are spent on Canadian platforms, because we've seen, haven't we, the Liberal Party and the federal government has spent a boatload of cash, millions and millions and millions of dollars on Facebook, Meta, while simultaneously being in a war with Meta that they started, which has led to terrible suffering, as we just mentioned, for independent media. And then I think the rest of that is pretty boring, really. But defund the CBCs in there as well.
I do want to say that close to 100 media outlets have failed since the introduction of Bill C-18. 3 more to fail here in the Lower Mainland in May 1. And this has been we've been fighting this like crazy and asking for help and repealing Bill C-18 to deaf ears. And Bill C-18 has also endangered our communities, because we can't put our news on Facebook or Instagram when there's a wildfire or something like that. And the irony of it, the Liberal government said they needed to start advertising on Meta because they recognize how important it is for news, for people to get their news. So that's the reason that they started spending millions of dollars on there. They're the reason that you can't get news on there, and yet now they're spending millions of dollars on there. So again, it's almost like Catch-22. It's like a bad movie or something like that, and it's absolutely ridiculous. And it's so many people have spoken.
Hypocrisy, isn't it? I think is the worst part for me. Anyway, I'm allergic to hypocrisy. It's a very serious, life-threatening allergy that I suffer from, and I see it right in front of me there, and I think a lot of other people do, and it's a little bit painful.
We're going to talk about it a little bit later too, because there was a good article done by another Peter Menzies here.
Well, I would say, sorry, Mark Carney's just come out, just for a bit of balance, and he's looked at the Conservative platform and he refers to it as a joke. And then goes on to say, we aren't in a joke. We're in the worst crisis of our lives. So that's going to be the Liberal response, I think, to that. There's lots of other stuff, though. I mean, I'd love to keep talking about it, but I know we're going to do something else about it, aren't we? But there's some things in there I'm absolutely fascinated by. Like, for example, he says he's going to eliminate the need to have a university degree to work in the federal public service. That's fascinating to me because Canada's like such a credential heavy society where it's like, oh, you want to be a librarian? Like, where are your master's degrees to be a librarian? So, you know what I mean? Like, this is the country where like if you haven't got a master's degree, it's almost like, oh, so you don't have a master's degree. You're that uneducated. It's like just to get the most boring, like easy job imaginable. So it's quite interesting that he says he wants to get rid of that requirement and instead hire people based on what they know rather than what their education looks like. And another thing is he wants to pursue free trade and mobility with the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. That's also massive. If that happened, that would be huge.
Yeah, we'll break that down, and then like you said, we've got the Prime Minister's comments on it, saying it's a joke. That seems to be a very superficial comment, but the National Post did an opinion piece on it and saying that the Liberal platform is alarmingly Trudeau-esque. Actually worse than the Trudeau one. They just basically subbed in his name and then just added some more dollar signs to it. It's actually huge. And it's terrifying a lot of the financial people. It's actually terrifying to what this would do to Canada. Again, acid inflation, great for the rich, really bad on the middle class and the poor. It's just horrible. And that we've seen. We've seen that over the last 10 years.
But we see, not just the last 10 years. If we were more specific, we've seen that throughout Mark Carney's career. He talks a lot about his experience, which is indeed, huge and very impressive. But he can talk about that and brag about that. But it's also incumbent upon us as members of the media, if you want to call us that, to actually look at what happened during his time when he had power, what that experience actually entails. And it is exactly as you say. It's a lot of inflation. It's a lot of asset inflation in particular. It's quite a lot of kind of top-down monetarism, lots of money printing, as it's kind of known, quantitative easing. Well, you've said it. You've already said it. Really, it's the last 10 years, but delivered by a man who has more than 10 years experience of doing that, like about 25 years or something.
And a lot of the policies in those inflation building things, and we see it through COVID too, favored huge corporations. Like, you remember the COVID shutdowns, huge corporations stayed open, huge corporations got lots of help, small businesses got wiped out. And if you look at the housing platforms between these two parties, one favors corporations and one favors the taxpayer.
Yeah, because it's almost like, I was just on about credentials there. I think it's almost like that kind of attitude, isn't it? Where the big companies, in a way, they're kind of credentialed, aren't they? It's like, they're blue chip companies. They've been around ages and they've got huge revenue, loads of staff, all the rest of it. Like, there's something about that where it's like, okay, we can trust them because they have the check mark next to their name, they're credentialed. But we can't trust the like mom and pops. We can't trust these random like 5 employee businesses. We're not going to go to them, and we're certainly not going to just cut taxes and let the citizen decide on that level, on an individual level. We're not going to do that. We're going to funnel the money through these really prestigious companies that we trust.
We even seen that with the CBC when they were losing their minds over Rebel News. Instead of attacking Rebel News, because I'm no fan of Rebel News, but instead of attacking Rebel News, they just decided to take the paintbrush out and just call all independent media basically not media.
Yeah, and don't forget that slur was uttered at the same time, and in connection with misinformation at the same time as the person you're alluding to spread misinformation.
Yeah. I guess if you're wearing the right garb, then you are allowed to spread misinformation, where the rest of us are entitled to shut up.
Well, that's the thing. The master and the Lord can make the odd mistake now and then, and you just have to, as a pleb, you have to look at that and say, well, the Lord knows what he's doing or knows what she's doing. Therefore, that was a good faith error. That was just a mistake made in good faith. But if the pleb and the rebel and the peasant with his pitchfork, if he makes a mistake or utters a falsehood, it was almost certainly in bad faith because he's outside of the castle walls and he wants to break in, and we don't like that. We don't like those peasants, do we?
Yes, we talked about King Arthur earlier. Where is he? Poilievre vows not to impose a home equity tax on liberals as the Liberals in NDP talk healthcare. This has come up, and the Liberals have looked at this in the past. I know that Chrystia Freeland and them looked at taxing the principal residence in the past. They've done studies on it, and they're the ones that introduced the capital gains, increasing the capital gains tax as well. And so this is now being floated by the Poilievre camp and saying that this is what's coming for you if you elect the Liberals.
Yeah, I think we had a little bit of a chat about it earlier, didn't we? And I think pretty much it's like there are people in the Liberal Party that they would do this because they see it as a question of fairness. They say, how is it fair that somebody in 1975 bought a house in the GTA for like $120,000 that's now worth $1.5 million or something like that? That's not reasonable. Let's tax them and then we can help other people. That there are people in the Liberal Party and certainly the NDP and the Greens and those parties that believe in that. Whether or not Mark Carney does is another question. I mean, he says he doesn't, or he's never said that he does anyway. But I think there's a little bit of pressure from within the party maybe to do that. And I think that's what Poilievre's done. He's tried to be a little bit cheeky and he's tried to slap back, as they say, or clap back. Sorry, that's what the kids say. And I think it's partly revenge because I think the same is roughly true of the Conservative Party. There are people in the Conservative Party that would like to cut the pharmacare, dental care, maybe even restrict abortion, but that's not Poilievre's position. And Carney and the Liberals have been saying that over and over again as if it is Poilievre's position. And I think he's just kind of like had enough. And he's thought, okay, if you're going to do that, if you're going to pick these kind of positions that some people within the party might hold that are very controversial and pretend that I want them, then I'm going to do the same to you. And I'm going to say, you want to tax, 75-year-old, a 75-year-old sort of senior citizen's home that they paid off 10 years ago. You want to tax that. And obviously that's like pretty inflammatory, isn't it? But there's kind of some truth to it, isn't there? But it's not quite
The
quite
big
reality.
thing though is that the majority of Canadian wealth is held in their home, so it is a scary one for people for sure. So it is one that I guess if you're going to pick something, that is where the majority of, especially the boomer generation, the majority of their wealth is tied up in their homes. That's where it is.
I think you can even say, can't you, that the majority of Canada's wealth, the majority of wealth in this country is there. So it's like it's a succulent pork chop, isn't it, for the hungry federal government to look at.
And then also, if you look at the UK, which is, like, I guess modeled after sometimes with the Carney Liberals, is they have an inheritance tax as well that's very punishing when you want to pass something on to your children, like your home.
Yeah, it's on a philosophical level, it's a real kick in the gut, that, isn't it? Because in England, I mean, it's a certain it sort of kicks in at a certain point. I think it's about £500,000 the last time I looked at it. But obviously, because houses have inflated, the price of houses have inflated to such an astonishing extent that that's not even a remarkable sum of money anymore in terms of a bequest in England. Obviously, that used to be quite a lot of money, but not so much now. So it started to bring in a lot of people that like had never thought about having to pay what are in effect death taxes. They never thought that that was even conceivable. But because of inflation, as you've said many times, like the worst enemy of not just the poor, but the average person, because of that, they now find themselves in this bracket. And obviously the government is not going to change that because they want to try and harvest the cash. Meanwhile, the elite, the actual genuinely rich people who might want to bequeath a castle or something like that to their kids, they just get a really expensive accountant or a really expensive lawyer. They fiddle with the ownership and the title, and you probably involve Bermuda or something like that. And Bob's your uncle. No inheritance tax.
Yeah, you look at trusts and you look at tax havens, which Brookfield has been accused of dodging over $5 billion in taxes that are, like could really help Canada out, and that would mean you pay less taxes if companies, corporations in Canada taking our resources, right? Because that's how that company makes money, utilizing Canadian resources. And then it dodged $5 billion in taxes that should be payable to Canada that we could use for services and all kinds of stuff. The Liberal Party being sued, though, by Rebel News for trademark infringement. This is the Holly Doan's Blacklock story. And the slogan that they're using, "Make Canada Great Again." I guess the Rebel News trademarked that slogan in 2019. Well, they were ahead of the game, I guess, eh?
That's I'm surprised that it took them so long to trademark it. Why didn't they do it like 2015 or something like that? Were they even around then?
I don't know. There you go. And then also a little bit of grief on the button gate that doesn't seem to want to go away. I watched Vasi Capellas from CTV talking to one of the Liberal MP candidates, and watching him squirm to come up with an answer why those people weren't fired. And they just there's right? Do you know what I mean? We've talked about it, so it's not worth going into more, but it's kind of ridiculous, actually, that those people weren't fired. It says a lot about what's going on. Why wouldn't they be fired? What would stop them from being fired?
Another question is, who else knew? Because, like, as has been mentioned many times, these were from like the headquarters. They were from the war room. They're like the elite cadre. They're not just randomers that you might see knocking on your door telling you to vote for the Liberal Party. This is like the elite class within the party, So you have to wonder, who else knew about this? Who told them to do it? Are they literally just like lone wolves? I mean, is that because that's kind of hard to believe? Think about your daily life now. Everything goes through like a WhatsApp group or something, doesn't it? Or a Facebook group. People are always talking about their plans, especially in things like politics. I find it so hard to believe that they just came up with this little conspiracy in the shadows and went and did it. I mean, I reckon, especially as well, they must have taken a photograph. Everybody takes a photograph of things they do now, don't they? And sends it around to their colleagues and friends. So that must have been out there. And then the question after that is, what the hell kind of culture do they have in that war room? What kind of ethical code do they abide by?
And why this is
many questions anyway.
And why this is a lawsuit and why it ties into Buttongate is because the Rebel News had licensed that slogan to hat manufacturers and other, like other wearables and stuff like that as a slogan, and that's what Buttongate was. They mocked up buttons with "Make Canada Great Again" to kind of make the Conservative Party look bad, to kind of make it look Trump-esque. And they manufactured those buttons. So then the Rebel News says that's a trademark infringement. They're seeking $100,000 for trademark infringement and $250,000 in punitive damages and court fees. So there you go. So that's by making those fake buttons.
I reckon the defense will be it was satire, isn't it?
Well, then that'd be good to see go to court too, because was it satire? Or was it election interference? Or what was it?
Well, didn't Ezra Levant used to be a lawyer? I don't know if I've got a feeling that he did used to be a lawyer, and he's the head of Rebel, so he would know exactly what he was doing. Because he gets it in court then, and he gets people chatting about it.
One thing that Rebel News is good at is going to court. Something that we haven't done for Bill C-18, and it's just ridiculous. He actually went to court for Bill C-18.
And he lost, didn't he?
Yeah, many Canadians, snowbirds in the U.S. looking to pack up and fly north for good. I mean, I'm not sure how much that is.
How many winters do you think they'll commit to that?
That's what I'm saying. I'm not sure how long that's going to go over, because back to shoveling the snow in Ottawa or laying on the beach in Florida and Hawaii, I don't know. I
don't know. Maybe they. It would be more believable if they said, "Okay, I'm just going to move to Mexico or the Dominican Republic or something, or even like Portugal." If they said that, then yeah, all right. But the idea that they're just gonna deal with -30 and stuff like that, I don't know.
I'd like to see the stats, like the real stats. Realtors reporting seeing more and more Canadians abandoning, like more and more meaning like how many? Like more and more meaning more than one, more than two, or is this just a headline that suits the needs of the time? Because
it's based on realtors. They've been chatting to American realtors, I guess.
Okay.
And they're saying that they're noticing it. But that is kind of anecdotal, isn't it?
Experts say, and
Yeah.
experts say, and then with the Pope passing there, keep the doors open. Ministers call on an ex-Pope to do more for the LGBTQ plus community.
I mean, I find this surreal, the Canadian press. But this is the sort of thing, if you ask me or anyone that works in the media, how do you know that X platform has this position, this kind of set of values? Just look at the kind of stories that they write and how they write them. Canadian press. So the pub's just died. Canadian press is like, how can we make this about LGBT? And then they've gone around and phoned up the most LGBT friendly or LGBT focused churches that they can find in Canada. And they're not even Catholic churches, you know? It's just they just wanted to write an article about the pub's dead. Let's write an article about LGBT issues or something like that. And they didn't have the material to write an article. So and you could tell. And I just thought that's interesting to me because obviously that tells you a little bit about their editorial stance and their editorial priorities.
Well, here's one for you, and maybe if we get if you're doing this, maybe we can get you on the camera as well instead of that little picture in the corner there. It's a new thing called looks maxing for young men and boys, where they're actually using hammers to smash their face to make themselves look more attractive. And that's a CBC article too that has written a feature on a strange new phenomenon of looks maxing, and that's to maximize your physical attractiveness. Bone smashing. Um, Apparently, maybe I need some bone smashing. I don't know what like I guess it's not
The
funny.
other thing, I mean,
Really.
there's some even more insane stuff in there. Like, I would advise people to read the article. But another thing that they do is, like, I don't know if this is just young people in general or just young men, but they're absolutely obsessed with their height. And so there's this surgery that you can get. I've seen a video of it before,
What?
where
Hmm.
a doctor will or a surgeon will break your shins and your thigh bone or something like that, and kind of stick in extra material to make your body longer. So they're doing that, like height increasing surgeries, which is obviously insane. Takes months and months to recover. Like you can't walk for a long time. God knows what it'll do to your sort of hips and things like that in the long term. But then on the more innocent side, there's this British dentist who says that you can chew gum, and if you rub your tongue against the roof of your mouth aggressively enough, that it will make your jaw bigger. I mean, it's kind of pathetic, isn't it? It's hard to wrap your head around it, but some of them are doing extraordinary damage to themselves. And there's even people that are getting surgeries on their eyes. I can't remember the name of the surgery, but it's to turn if you've got brown eyes, which for some reason a lot of people don't want. They go and get surgery so that they can have blue eyes, which for some reason is deemed to be better. Like they're doing insane things to their bodies, these people, and it's a little bit frightening.
Yeah. Um, Smashing your face with a hammer. Wow.
One way to get hammered, isn't it? As we said.
Yeah. I was debating whether or not to share this because I remember in grade six, kids can be pretty mean, and I've got like that when I was a youngster that they call it like pelican lip because I have a point on my lip or whatever. So I thought if I chewed on it, that I could chew it away. So I chewed on my lip for a long time in grade five, until it turned into this big festering, like infected sore. And you know what? When it finally healed, it was still there, the pelican lip. And I
So you
realized,
tried to lips max.
and I realized at that point that this is what you're born with, and this is you just get used to it because and not listen to other people.
But also, sooner or later, you're gonna realize. I would say to these men, you desperately need to have conversations with actual women, because then you might understand that women are attracted to a lot more than just your face and your body. In fact, considerably more attracted to who you are and what you offer as a person, and your reaction to the world around you and what you do with your life and all that. That's more attractive to a woman. Hence, you know, somebody like Elon Musk. very controversial figure, but I've just plucked him out of my head. He's hardly a looker, is he? He's a pretty average looking dude, and yet there are probably millions of women that would, chop off their feet just to spend the night with him. That's because he's an inspirational figure who's achieved great things. Like, focus on that. Don't focus on hammering your jaw. That's not going to do you any favors. You're not going
Hey,
to get any great women doing that.
if you want proof, both Iain and I are married, and we didn't do any bone smashing or looks maxing.
No.
There's somebody out there for everybody, and doing stuff like this seems silly. And it seems like what you said, work on becoming a better person, and that will attract people, as opposed to, I think social media in that regard has definitely hurt a lot of people, and that seems to be ridiculous. There you go.
Sad.
Here's our friend Yves Francois Blanchette saying that to keep RSPs in the family, you know how you can borrow out of your RSP when you're buying a home? He's saying now you should be able to borrow out of your RSP to get your children their first home. So there you go. Like I said earlier, that's something that would help all Canadian kids out. That sounds like a good thing. I know you can borrow out of that, but lots of times in this day and age, if kids don't get help from their parents, it's very, very hard to buy a property because you can't get the down payment. The down payment is the crucial one. Getting that down payment together when property values are so inflated. There you go. So that's one way, and that's a Holly Doan Blacklock story too. And I think that's something any party should pick up on, allowing you to take those savings that are sitting there in an RSP to use them towards purchasing a home for a family member.
Yeah, it's something, isn't it? It's one of those little things, but it wouldn't do much by itself. But why not? If it's just the case of like telling one bureaucrat to change something overnight or something like that, then why not?
We got a little clip here to play. We got two clips to play because this is the one that's been the carbon tax thing. So here's Mark Carney first on the carbon tax.
Climate change, we're working on climate change too. We're working on climate change too in a sustainable way that grows this economy. You know what we're doing on climate change is we're getting the big polluters. We got rid of the carbon tax. Did you guys notice that? We got rid of the carbon tax. We listened, and we got rid of the carbon tax. In fact, Cody and Jaime were like on me from day one. So I was like, okay, we got rid of it on day one. But we're changing the system so that the big polluters pay you.
There you go. And then we got this other clip here to play from a local candidate here in Kelowna on the carbon tax. We played it yesterday, but we're going to play it again because they seem to be different.
Stephen, do you believe carbon taxes are an effective way to reduce emissions?
The experts say it is. Every expert on the planet has said it was the most cost-effective way to do this, and unfortunately, 38 or 39% of the Conservative Party made so much noise about this that it became unpalatable. And so, it doesn't mean that we're going to abandon it. It just means it's going to have to be applied in a different way. And
So I'm not sure who got rid of it. Did the Conservatives get rid of it, or did the Liberals get rid of it? Like how? Like, I mean, one person says that they got rid of it, taking credit for it, and the other person said it was taken away because the Conservatives made it unpalatable.
Yeah, that's a hell of a gaffe from Stephen Fuhr, isn't it? And we haven't really we haven't exactly held his feet to the fire over that one, but people have taken our video, haven't they? And they've started to attack him for it. But I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily say that that's what Mark Carney. Well, obviously, it isn't what Mark Carney would say. He said something completely different. But I think, like I said yesterday, even though it's a gaffe, I think Stephen Fuhr is being a lot more honest, actually. So I don't know. Maybe that's to his credit.
There you go. Eleanor Sturco, a very vocal MLA here for the BC Conservatives, has come out obviously in support of Pierre Poilievre. And one of her big platform pieces is definitely she's fighting for safer streets, criminals behind bars, and a compassionate plan for getting people back into their homes. Over 50,000 deaths and chaos in communities. That's what, and that's a National Post article that Eleanor Sturco has done. she's definitely been relentless in the legislature on this. She's been very, very loud and vocal on the drug policies here of the British Columbia government.
Well, and she's a former police officer, isn't she? So she knows what she's on about. She actually has experience.
Yeah, I'd say she's one of the more vocal MLAs. I mean, I hear more from Sturco than I hear from many of the other ones.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'd say she's almost like Rustad's number two, isn't she? In reality, but maybe not on paper.
She may one day be a BC premier. Who knows, right?
Yeah,
Who knows these days.
I
right?
think that's worth putting a bet on.
They're definitely in the race, I would say, if the BC Conservatives can figure out who they are. Sometimes it's tough to understand. Peter Menzies, we talked about this earlier, wrote an article that was shared here by Andrew Coyne. The fate of the free press depends on the outcome of this election. And it's in a really interesting article. And Peter Menzies is a Canadian journalist, media policy commentator, served as vice chair of telecommunications at CRTC, and was publisher and editor-in-chief of the Calgary Herald. So he's not a slouch. He's a senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute and has advised tech companies on media-related matters. This is an article that is very, very prudent to read on media, the state of media, right? And it's just in a week now, Canada will wake up to a new world in which news media is either free or permanently dependent on the government. Hollydone Blacklocks did the same type of story. And Iain and I have been talking about this forever. If we have a media that is left, the only thing left is government-funded media, and where Hollydone has actually said that it will basically become a federal arm of the government.
So it seems then that he is, if not explicitly, then kind of is intimating that the better choice would be the Conservatives, it seems to me.
Well, if you want a free and independent media, that's
yeah.
what
But he doesn't actually say that. I'm just scanning the article now, and it doesn't seem like he actually says that. But I mean, that's the only thing that you can deduce from what he said, isn't it?
Yeah, it says all that will make it even more difficult for if the Conservatives lose, then
right.
The bond between the Liberals and the nation's media will be permanently welded. Conservatives or others who believe the media and the government should be dependent on each other's support will be permanently positioned as a threat and will be encouraged to comply with the new status quo. It's possible, but unlikely Conservatives will maintain their position favoring free and independent media. Platforms such as ourselves, The Hub, Blacklocks, Western Standard Net would have a really tough time to compete in this environment.
Yeah. I just think a lot of people might think that we're sort of cranks when we go on about this or when this guy talks about it, but this is so important. This is like, obviously we're biased, but I think this is like a top 5 issue for this election, because it's not hyperbole, it's not an exaggeration to say that this could change the reality of life in Canada. That's how important it is. It's, very few issues are more important than this, than having a free media.
I think the last sentence here, it says, when it's all said and done, the future of a free and independent press and the public's trust in it is on the line next Monday. It will live or it will die. And we've been saying this over and over again. Bill C-18 suppresses media's ability to be free and independent from the government. Bill C-18 basically put media at the mercy of the government, because all media outlets, including CBC and CTV and the rest of them, have lost half their traffic because of Bill C-18, because the platform is so important to Canadians getting their news there. And the government itself has said that, including the Liberal Party. They said it's so important that they had to start advertising on this platform that they called the evil empire, basically, that they would fight to the death. And here they are, feeding it money while choking off independent media, choking off all media, making media more and more dependent on the crumbs they feed it. And, journalists' jobs are depending on it. So, people say journalists are compromised. Well, some of them would argue that, of course, they're compromised because they won't survive without the crumbs, but they're dying anyway. Close to 100 have died already since Bill C-18 was introduced, and it'll be 2 years this June. that Bill C-18 has been in place. The only nation in the G7 to have suppressed our ability to put news on Meta. And the Liberal government has talked about it repeatedly, about they want to do the Online Harms Act, which in that discussion is talking about getting rid of X as well. So do you want to live in a country where media is basically living off the handouts of the government, and then the platforms that everybody else in the world uses are not available here in Canada to help you, make you safer?
Yeah, like another way of putting it is when you're talking about the Online Harms Act or potential act. Would you like it to be the case that the federal government, so supervised by the Liberal Party in this imagined scenario, like a Liberal minister, like Pascal Santonge or Stephen Guilbeault or whoever you want to think of, would you like that person, that minister, to supervise a bureaucracy in Ottawa to look at information and decide whether or not you can see it, whether or not it's acceptable for you to look at that information? Do you actually trust them? Do you trust them to make that decision for you? Because I have to say, for myself anyway, I don't trust anybody else. I don't trust my own wife, my dad, to decide what I can or cannot look at and read and learn about. I only trust one person, and it's me. I have to see it myself. And I think everybody that has any sort of self-respect really should adopt that position as well and feel the same way. Why should you let somebody else decide what you can read or watch?
Do you know
You might as well let somebody else decide what you can think.
Do you know what's really telling though? This guy is credentialed. Like, we talk about the guys, the experts, credentials. This guy has the credentials. And this is what he has to say. How many outlets do you think will pick this story up? How many do you think will pick it up, other than us and a few? Andrew Coyne shared it. But I mean, how many will pick it up and see it as this big deal? Because every media outlet in Canada should pick this up and say, this is the defining moment for Canada. Do we have a media that relies on government handouts, or do we free the media from the one party?
But what you've said highlights possibly the main problem here, which is that they won't highlight this because they are most likely on the take from the government. They're probably getting these handouts, so they're not gonna promote someone, no matter how credentialed he is, that's talking about how that's a bad thing, because that's turkeys voting for Christmas.
There you go. Turns out we're the ones in the pot, right?
We were in the pot from the start. We didn't even get a vote.
Actually, I'm going to post this on my LinkedIn later. Plus, there's an interview we've done with actually all the candidates in the Okanagan have said Bill C-18 has to go, but Mark Carney has not said that. Pierre Poilievre has come out and said that. And good news for many in Canada that have had a strong dislike for this guy and some of the words he said. Klaus Schwab retires as chairman from the World Economic Forum. He's got that Dr. Evil voice when he said that, he was very proud of his what was his, I think the comment was, my number one student is Justin Trudeau, a young leader. And that he's
something like that. And Christy Freeland as well.
And he's infiltrated the cabinet of the Canadian government. And then
was it penetrated? I can't remember what the word was.
I think it was infiltrated, the word is. And then you can find the video, you can watch it yourself. And the word, it seems like it's out of a Dr. Doom video or something. And then Chrystia Freeland was actually listed on the site as one of the directors, but when she ran for the Liberal leadership, she had that scrubbed pretty quick.
Well, Carney, was it last year? I think it was last year, wasn't it? Carney actually went to Davos, the World Economic Forum in Switzerland, and somebody, I think it might have been Rebel, chased him down, didn't they, and asked him what he was doing there. Yeah. So obviously Carney's very friendly to WEF. In that clip that you just played of Carney, I watched that whole press conference or whatever the hell it was, Mark Carney speaking from a balcony or something like that. And during that, I think he was heckled. Somebody heckled him about, and he came out and he was like, to his sort of credit, I guess, he was actually kind of funny. Actually, kind of amused me, where he was like pretending to listen to an earpiece, and he was like saying, "Oh, WAF tells me to do this." I mean, that for me, in miniature, that is why Mark Carney is so much better than Justin Trudeau as a candidate. Because Justin Trudeau in that scenario, I feel, would have like gone on a moral lecture and he would have said like, Canadians do not need, like it's
Yeah.
just so boring. Whereas Mark Carney just told a really simple joke, made himself seem like an ordinary dude, won the crowd back, and continued with his little speech. Like it just highlights for me like Carney is just so many levels above Justin Trudeau. It's the Liberals are just they're happy as Larry, aren't they, that they've got somebody like that because he, he's really making a fool out of Justin Trudeau.
We have a clip here from Daniel Smith on the WEF and the retirement of Klaus Schwab.
Are your views on the World Economic Forum?
Well, I'm not a young global leader of tomorrow. I've never been to one of their events, and I look at Pierre Poilievre saying that he doesn't intend to go to their events and doesn't intend to have his ministers involved in them either. And I take the same view.
But why? You're still not explaining what your views are on the World Economic Forum. Like, what do you find distasteful about it?
I guess I find it distasteful when billionaires brag about how much control they have over political leaders, as the head of that organization has. And I think that that is offensive. The people who should be directing government are the people who vote for them. And the people who vote for me and for my colleagues are people who live in Alberta and who are affected by our decisions. And so, quite frankly, until that organization stops bragging about how much control they have over political leaders, I have no interest in being involved with them. My focus is here in Alberta, solving problems for Albertans with the mandate from Albertans.
Well, there you go.
Strong response. She obviously didn't want to do that, did she? But the journalist pushed her into giving a proper response there. But
It's
interesting.
Odd. This is like, what is it that you have a problem with? Maybe you should watch
It was
the
almost
clip.
like the reporter thought she was going to do a gotcha, didn't she? It's like, gotcha, you don't have an answer. But obviously, Danielle Smith has thought about that a lot and had a good answer.
Maybe someone should play that clip for when Klaus Schwab talks about infiltrating the Canadian cabinet. Like, it doesn't sound very good, right? When he says those words. No matter how you play that, like, I've infiltrated the cabinet. Just like,
it's terrible. Especially in that kind of like, as you say, the German accent. It doesn't help, does it? In the sort of skinhead. And he looks a bit so sinister anyway. Even if he had hair, he'd still look sinister. It's not good.
It's like the
World Economic Forum must be happy that he's on the way out because they can get some like attractive, innocent-looking woman or something like that to take over.
Or Justin Trudeau may well find himself in that role.
Maybe, yeah, but he's I don't know. That's not good for PR either, is it? He's not exactly popular.
Let's move on to markets as we wrap up the day here. Markets. Look at that, up today. Up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. And the Trump tariff terrors. How's that? Anybody wants
a lot of money being made.
Anybody wants to steal that? We should trademark that. Trump tariff terrors. As he moves the markets up and down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. There you go. Gold. Gold broke $3,500 an ounce this morning. And then, like I said, whenever you hit those big round numbers, guess what happens? You get a pullback because it has a tough time with that. So gold was up huge this morning, and now it's off $36 right now. It's like I said, when it challenges that number, it hit the $3,500 an ounce this morning. I think it actually went to $3,500 and just over the $3,500 mark. And then since then, it has fallen back to $33.89. And some people say, "Oh my God, it's fallen back." Look at that chart. Look at that chart. And we talked about that yesterday. That looks like a chart that's run too far, too fast, and it looks like it needs to kind of consolidate if you look at it from a technical perspective. And then if we look at our friend Bitcoin, we said that it started to look like a good base. We started saying that around 80,000, and look at that. Look at that, challenging 90. Actually up over 90. Where is it at this very moment here? There you go. Bitcoin over the 90,000 mark, just about 91. When I clipped this was about 91,000. Right now it's just under 91,000 in US dollars. Well over 100 grand in Canadian bucks though, right? There you go. Canadian dollar up up in the 72-cent mark. Maybe David Eby is going to give British Columbians that $1,000 he promised us. Now that he said that the reason he didn't do it is because the Canadian dollar was weak. There you go, stronger than ever.
Yeah, he's delinquent at the minute, isn't he? He needs to sort that out.
There you go. And then gold. And we pulled this chart up here because guess how much gold Canada owns? I think if you watch this show on a regular basis, you will know zero. And here somebody actually is highlighted. I think Zero Hedge highlighted that Canada sells all its gold right here, right there. Right
and
there.
Didn't Donald Trump yesterday, I think it was yesterday, came out and said something along the lines of the country that makes the rules is the country with the most gold.
That's an old saying.
Which is the US.
He who has all the gold makes all the rules. And then you know how as bad as Canada is? Just look left on that chart.
This is the thing, like I often have this urge when I'm speaking to people where they're like, "Oh, Canada, like everything is so bad and we made such a bad decision." And I'm just like, let me introduce you to the United Kingdom. You're going to learn something. You can make even worse decisions than Canada. It is possible.
And yeah, look to the left. Although, on the other side of that, they kept half. So the United Kingdom did keep half their gold. They made some bad decisions back then. But Canada sold it all. They just went all in, double down. And Mark Carney was part of that Bank of Canada when they sold the last of those dregs of gold. And there you go.
Well, back then it was very much a case of gold is pointless and we need to get rid of it, experts say. Good old experts.
It's an antique that have no value. Well, there you go.
Yeah. And they take the Mickey, let's say, to put it politely, and they refer to them as like gold bugs, don't they? Like, oh, you crazy gold bug cranks. It's like the gold bugs are sat there with like a massive amount of wealth, and they're just laughing. Like, who's the idiot here? Who's the mug?
You know, like the fancy bankers will tell you, you know, like they'll sit there and tell you how there's no inflation, that some inflation is good for you, and that inflation is transitory, and to go ahead and make that purchase, get that mortgage, because the Canadian interest rates will not be going up into the foreseeable future. So go ahead and get that $1 million mortgage. It'll be fine. And I'm not making any of things up. Those are all things that the Tiff Macklin said. And then they raised interest rates 19-fold. I didn't make it up. I didn't make it up. He said it. And apparently, Mark Carney has said several times that inflation is good. Good for who?
It's certainly good if you've got a gigantic pile of debt that you want to pay off, which it seems to me is Mark Carney's plan.
There you go. And then the IMF for the last bit in our thing there you go. Canada kicking Luxembourg's butt. Hey, look at that. Canada kicking Luxembourg's butt.
Unlucky Luxembourg. How does that feel?
That's right. Now we don't say like. That's why you invite, like when you're racing somebody, you invite somebody that's actually just a little bit worse than you. You won't be dead last, right? So there you go.
Yeah, and especially a gigantic, powerful, famous country like Luxembourg. That's the kind of country that you want to be ahead of.
There you go. And let's move on to our AI and text thing. There's a scary one. We're going to play this clip here for you first, then we'll talk about it.
I think we are in that phase. 2030 or so, you'll start to see job displacements. It'll be massively disruptive. Most of the jobs, they're not even jobs. It's servitude to making a living and surviving. Look at the top professions. People are already building AI replacements for those. That's a pretty wonderful world and a pretty scary world in the short term. It's a real risk. By 2050, this will look like great abundance for those countries that allow it. There's a battle for which political philosophy dominates the world. Strength in AI will determine economic strength as a different kind of weapon of war.
There you go.
That's scary, isn't it?
There you go. There.
I mean, the abundance bit is good.
Yeah. Like I said, the cat's out of the bag. There's no choice but to go all in on this because the Chinese are not stopping. Because actually, we have this next one here. robots compete in a half marathon. Guess where? Beijing. I don't have the clip. Well, maybe we'll play the clip tomorrow, but I don't have the clip. But they actually competed it, unless Rommel has that clip. But the humanoid robot half marathon took place in April 19th and featured 20 teams competing with bipedal robots of different makes and sizes. So, I mean, it's like the EV market over there. Like, there's not one, like realistically in North America, there's Tesla is the big EV maker, and then say Ford is in there in second, and there's a couple other guys in there trying to get some. But China has like 100 EV makers, and I would say the same thing going in their robot manufacturing. There's hundreds of companies making robots in China, and then in the United States, I don't think there's any in Canada that I know of. In the United States, it's Tesla with Optimus, and then Figure 1, 2, 3. I think it is Figure 1, 2, 3. And then Boston Dynamics. There's a few companies here. But in China, they fund innovation like crazy. And there's some lessons to be had, for sure. And actually, I didn't put it in here, but Daniel Smith was I believe was in Japan, taking high-speed rail and talking about what you talked about. She's actually talking about building that high-speed rail between Edmonton and Calgary. So she was there testing it out. Look at Daniel Smith being progressive again, hey?
Well, that one, unlike the other one in Toronto, in Ontario and Quebec, the Alberta one might actually get built because I'm sure they'll push it through. They'll make it happen.
And I guarantee it that in Alberta, it won't cost $4 billion just for the consulting phase.
Yeah.
That's how you make 20.
Yeah, I'm sure Air Canada won't build it either. Like
that's how you pay.
Eastern one.
That's how you pay $25 billion in consulting every year as the federal government, because you do consulting contracts for $4 billion. I asked ChatGPT that question, and it said that was ludicrous, and that it would do it for like in the hundreds of thousands of dollars in the whole consultation process. But obviously, the federal government has a different way of doing things.
Maybe when AI is in charge of things, we can all be consultants.
There you go. This is put out by, and you and I have talked about this over and over again in our EV section, the EV mandates. And we talk about this over and over again. The Ontario Doug Ford and the Liberals are fighting to hang on to the auto market. They said the Canadian auto market, which there is no Canadian automaker. If they don't dump that EV mandate, there will not be an auto market in Canada. And right now, there doesn't seem to be any movement towards dumping the EV mandate. Conservatives say they'll dump it, but it sounds like, and with Stephen Guilbeault still in that cabinet, I doubt if they'll ever dump that, because he doesn't even want to build roads. Never mind let you drive a gas car.
Maybe this is a genius plan to have a Canadian EV sort of corporate giant to rival Tesla. Maybe that's what will happen.
Again, how many corporate EV giants have come out of anywhere? Many of them gone broke in the United States. It's very hard. A famous person once said, prototypes are easy, production is hell and hard to do. And look at even the legacy automakers. They're having a really tough time making EVs. There's very few out there that are actually doing well at it. Tesla does a really good job.
Well, the Europeans, I mean, famously sort of like the best manufacturers on the planet, pretty much, the Europeans, particularly the Germans. They haven't really cracked it, have they? And nor have the Japanese. They don't. I mean, they've tried. They got like Nissan Leaf and stuff like that, haven't they? But they're not exactly in the lead on EVs, are they?
There's really, I mean, in North America, it's really is Tesla, and I would say they might be doing some deals. I'd say that Jim Farley of Ford will be the one that would actually do a deal. But in China, there's a lot of EV auto manufacturers like BYD and a whole bunch of other ones, XPeng, all that kind of stuff, that have been blocked from this market right now. But if they ever get into this market, that'll be the end of the auto market as well, as we know it anyway. Tesla's actually sending out emails and offering you a 2-day test drive. There you go. So if you want to try Tesla out, there you go. I think that's mainly in the US right now. And then on to our memes, the fun part of the show, meme. There you go. And this one here, we're going to play a little clip here. This has got to be the world's record for a Canadian ballot. Look at this. We'll play this clip here. That's probably good enough anyway. We probably don't need that song. You know which riding that is?
It is Nepean.
No, that's the Carleton riding. That's the riding that.
Sorry, yeah, you're right. No, you're right. I meant to say that.
That's
Them up.
That's the Pierre Poilievre riding, and it looks like somebody's playing some political games. Obviously, the people that are in the war room there with the Button boys, Button Gate. I shouldn't just blame boys. Maybe it was girls too. Buttons. The Button people obviously also know how to do. Like, this is a waste of Canadian tax dollars, and this is obviously meant to distort and to go after Pierre Poilievre. It's just ridiculous.
It's a waste of paper, isn't it? That's for sure.
It's a waste of paper. It's a waste of energy. And it's just ridiculous. But hey, trickery seems to be something that somebody seems to be very fond of. Trickery, lying, and deceit. There you go.
I'm quite surprised that it hasn't been done in Nepean now, which is Mark Carney's riding. There's only 5 there, 5 candidates. But it seems like they've targeted Pierre. I mean, the Carleton riding is a little bit closer than it's less likely that Pierre will win there than that Carney will win in Nepean. Like, Carney's apparently just nailed on, whereas it might be a little bit closer in Carleton, but I don't know if that's the reason. I would still expect Pierre to win there anyway. I mean, realistically.
A comment here. Joe says that Tesla's like Apple. All brand recognition is actually a crap product. I mean, okay, Joe. I drive a Tesla for a couple of years now. I disagree. But hey, what do I know? You obviously are the expert. So there you go. Experts say. And then we got a couple other ones here that are just fun. There's our media. We got that. There's our media, all feeding off of the. There you go. We're not in there. We didn't get a boob to suckle on.
Yeah, we did not get a teat.
No, not for us. None for us. Independent media, out.
Isn't a couple of those are the same? Like CP24 and CTV, they're both Bell, aren't they? So really, they should be one piglet. They shouldn't be 2 piglets.
So you mean there's room for somebody else?
There's definitely room for somebody else. Who would it be? I mean, Globe and Mail, maybe? They like a bit of teat now and then.
There you go. And then the last one we have here, and this is kind of what we talked about earlier too. That's why I put it in here, because we talked about it, how Poilievre maybe bringing up the housing thing because of they brought out the abortion issue, right?
Indeed, and that to an extent, Carney has been a lot more reluctant than Justin Trudeau was to bring up things like this. But, he's learning. Like he says all the time, he's not a politician, even though he kind of is and has been a while. Well, he's certainly a politician now, but he kind of has been a politician for a long time, I would argue. But he says, look, I'm not a politician, I don't really know what I'm doing. But he has still been very, very deceitful about his opponent, hasn't he? Saying that he's going to cut and everything, and now and then he's hinted at abortion. But I feel like maybe he's reluctant to do it because it's just such an obvious falsehood, isn't it? It's kind of... Yeah. It's a hard one to do. It's even when you're a politician, so you've basically sold your soul for your career path. I think it's probably still hard to tell like outright brazen lies. It's still it's got to hurt.
I mean, he has told quite a few. We put that ballot back up. There you go. Well, that's okay. We can put the ballot back up because that is absolutely ridiculous, right? I know when I went in to vote, I voted already. They had to fold that ballot up, and there was only 5 people on my ballot, and they just folded it. Imagine stuffing that. Like how big the box is again? It's almost like a ribbon that you have there.
Yeah, I was thinking that actually, as we were looking at that picture, because I also voted yesterday, and mine was I think it was just 4. I think it was just 4 candidates. It was like a nice little, very thin slip of paper, when I put it in there, it still wasn't that easy. I still had to like tap it in. So how the hell do you get in like that novel? How do you put that in the little slot?
So this is obviously again a game, and this I would say is in all seriousness the news outlet should be doing a story on this, because this is obviously a targeted trickery or whatever they want to call it to basically I would even argue that it's election interference, because there's no way there's that many serious candidates running in that riding.
That's what it would be termed, I think, if it was happening to the Liberal Party. It would be termed election interference.
They would be
Yeah, because
screaming.
it's
They
an
would
attempt
be
to stay
screaming.
within the rules, but to fiddle about and frustrate, basically. It's election frustration, you might say.
Our friend on one of those main media outlets might even call it Russian interference and say that the Russians are funding it.
Well, do any of their names end in ski? Any of the independent candidates? Then it's definitely Russian interference, isn't it?
It's just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, and it's shameful. And that the media is not picking up on it as well and going after them for that, because that is terrible, terrible, terrible.
It's certainly, it's not good neighborly behavior, is it? It's not respectful. It's not taking democracy seriously. And
No,
I thought that that's what we were supposed to do. Thought we were supposed to cherish our beautiful democracy.
I think in that case, it's win at all costs. Doesn't matter. It does not matter. But there you go. And I think Joe again makes a reference. Rebel's always suing someone. I think Rebel makes its money suing people and fundraising. Most of their stuff, they fundraise. They try to get into controversies, I believe, and they try to sue and fund. And yeah, there you go. That's their model, I guess. But wouldn't it be great if we just had a free and independent media that actually could survive or not survive on its own merits? Wouldn't that be a world to live in?
Yeah, and then we might not see Rosemary Barton enjoying making straw man arguments about independent media by making it seem like every single outlet that isn't CBC or CTV is somehow Rebel, as if like those are the choices. It's either CBC and CTV or Rebel. There's nothing in between, which is of course nonsense.
Well, there you go. We only have what do we got left here? We got only a few days left. We got we're going to do the platforms. We're going to go take the Liberal platform and the Conservative platform and take a look at it. I haven't seen the NDP platform. Do they have one? Not sure. And then I have Renee Merrifield in here at noon, and then Dan Elbis is in here as well. 2 NDP candidates are supposed to come in and do an interview with me. I just got a message here saying that maybe they're not, but who knows? And we've invited Stephen Fura numerous times. And there you go. We could ask him about his what he was thinking there with that. Who made the faux pas, Carney or himself? There you go.
Yeah, you've got a comment there. The fella who disagreed with you, or I don't know if it's a fella or female, that disagreed with you about Tesla.
There you go.
Still got love for you. That's what we want, isn't it? We want that.
There you go.
That happy disagreement.
You're welcome, Joe, anytime. You get a 2-day trial of a Tesla, and then you can make the comments. I don't know if you've ever driven one, but the cool thing is the car drives you. I just push the button and say, take me home, and it drives me home. And I say, take me to work, and it drives me to work. Pretty sweet deal. And you know what the other thing I did yesterday? Because my son let me drive his. He has one as well. And I didn't know where he parked it in the big Costco parking lot. You know how I found it? I opened it on the app. On the app. And there's the blue dot where I am, and there's the other red dot where the car is, and I just walked towards it. I didn't have to know where it was. I could have actually.
So you didn't do actual self-summon.
I could have done summon. I could have done summon too, but I didn't want to make a spectacle of myself right now. So
I didn't want to show off.
I did it once in the Costco parking lot, and everybody was like looking at me like I was some kind of like alien or something. That's so. It is kind of cool. The car drives up to you, picks you up, and but it causes, especially like all these Tesla haters out there right now, not exactly the best thing to do. You're not getting any claps there. You're just probably getting boos and hisses. So there you go.
Yeah.
We do thank you. We do thank the people that come here every day and watch and share and comment. We really appreciate that. And if you could help us get the message out and vote for a free and independent media, that's the main thing. We should be screaming that from the rooftops, that there should be a free and independent media, and media should make its own way. It shouldn't be relying on you, the taxpayer, to fund them. But we should also be able to have the audience that we earned, over 200,000 on our Meta platform, Facebook and Instagram. We earned that over 10 years serving our community, keeping them safe, informing them, and saying whatever it is that we think, not what we're told to think. And then, if you respect that, then we hope that you continue to support this platform. And with that said, we thank you for watching NowMedia.
We don't just report the news, we live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent news.